The sound of shattering glass echoed through Dominic Caruso's office, each shard hitting the marble floor like tiny bullets finding their mark. I flinched, my fingers still poised over my keyboard where I'd been typing the correspondence he'd demanded be finished by noon. It was 11:47 a.m., and apparently, 13 minutes wasn't enough time to meet his impossible standards. "This is what you call acceptable work?" His voice was low, dangerous, the kind of quiet that preceded storms. I'd been his executive secretary for 18 months, and I'd learned to read the subtle shifts in his tone the way sailors read the sky. This particular pitch meant someone was about to get eviscerated, and today, that someone was me. I stood slowly, smoothing down my gray pencil skirt, with hands that trembled despite my efforts to appear calm. The office was a monument to power and wealth. All dark wood paneling and floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the city Dominic Caruso controlled from the shadows. Every piece of furniture, every painting, every carefully positioned object screamed money and danger in equal measure. "I followed your specifications exactly, Mr. Caruso," I said, keeping my voice steady even as my heart hammered against my ribs. "The letter to the Vitelli family includes all the points you outlined this morning." He moved from behind his massive desk, with the fluid grace of a predator, his 6'3" frame seeming to consume the space between us. Dominic Caruso was brutally handsome in a way that made smart women stupid. Sharp jawline dusted with perpetual 5 o'clock shadow, dark hair always perfectly styled, storm gray eyes that could strip away every defense you'd carefully constructed. His tailored 3-piece suit probably cost more than my monthly rent, the charcoal fabric emphasizing broad shoulders, and a physique that suggested he was as comfortable with violence as he was with boardroom negotiations. "You followed my specifications," he repeated, each word dripping with contempt. He stopped close enough that I could smell his cologne. Something expensive and woody that always made my traitorous body respond in ways it absolutely shouldn't. "Tell me, Diana, what good are specifications if they lack any semblance of intelligence or initiative?" The criticism stung more than it should have. I'd graduated top of my class, worked my way through college while supporting my younger sister, and landed this position because I was exceptional at what I did. But Dominic Caruso had a special talent for making me feel perpetually inadequate, like I was always one mistake away from being discarded. "I can revise it," I offered, hating how small my voice sounded. "You think I have time for revisions?" He was even closer now, and I became acutely aware of the heat radiating from his body, the way his presence seemed to fill every molecule of oxygen in the room. "The Vitellis expect this correspondence by 1 p.m. That gives you little over an hour to completely rewrite it in a way that doesn't make me look like I employ incompetent children." His eyes raked over me with something that wasn't quite disdain, but felt equally cutting. I'd worn my most professional outfit today, the gray skirt and white silk blouse that made me feel competent and put together. But under his scrutiny, I felt exposed, like he could see through the carefully maintained facade to the woman underneath who lay awake at night, replaying every interaction with him, analyzing every barbed comment for some hidden meaning. "I'll have it ready," I said, lifting my chin with whatever dignity I could salvage. "See that you do." He turned away, dismissing me with the gesture. "And Diana? Next time you feel the urge to interpret my instructions rather than execute them, remember that there are 100 women who would kill for your position. You're replaceable. Act accordingly." The words hit like a physical blow, but I forced myself to walk calmly back to my desk just outside his office door. Only when I was seated, hidden behind my computer monitor, did I allow my mask to crack slightly. My hands shook as I opened the document, my vision blurring with tears I refused to let fall. Replaceable. The word echoed in my mind like a taunt. After 18 months of working 70-hour weeks, of anticipating his every need before he voiced it, of learning the intricacies of his legitimate business empire, and carefully ignoring the whispers about his other enterprises, I was still just replaceable. The worst part was knowing he was right. Dominic Caruso could snap his fingers and have a line of qualified candidates outside his door within hours. The position of executive secretary to one of the city's most powerful men, even one as notoriously difficult as Dominic, was coveted enough that people overlooked the brutal hours and even more brutal boss. I blinked rapidly, forcing the tears back, and began rewriting the letter. My fingers flew over the keyboard with practiced efficiency, drawing on every ounce of skill I possessed. I hated him in that moment. Hated his impossible standards, his casual cruelty, the way he made me feel simultaneously worthless and hyper-aware of his existence. But beneath the hate was something darker, more complicated. Something that made my pulse quicken when he stood too close, that made me notice the way his suits fit across his shoulders, that made me replay our interactions long after I should have forgotten them. It was irrational, self-destructive, and absolutely undeniable. I was attracted to a man who treated me like I was disposable. The realization made me type even faster, channeling my frustration into the work. I finished the letter with 20 minutes to spare, proofread it 3 times, then printed it on the expensive letterhead he preferred for important correspondence. My hand was steady as I placed it on his desk, though my heart raced as he looked up from whatever he'd been reviewing. He read in silence, his expression giving nothing away. I stood before his desk like a student awaiting judgment, my professional mask firmly in place despite the turmoil underneath. Finally, he set the letter down. "Better," he said, the single word somehow more devastating than his earlier criticism. Not good, not excellent, just better. "You can go to lunch." I retreated to my desk, grabbing my purse with hands that still trembled slightly. The building's executive floor was quiet, most people having already left for their lunch breaks. I took the elevator down to the lobby, nodding politely to the security guards who knew me by name after 18 months of arriving before dawn and leaving long after dark. The November air hit my face like a slap, cold and cleansing. I walked without direction, needing to put distance between myself and that office, that man, that impossible situation. My feet carried me to a small park 3 blocks away, a pocket of green in the steel and glass jungle where I sometimes came to decompress. I sat on a bench, finally allowing the tears to fall. They came silently, tracking down my cheeks as I stared at the bare trees and gray sky. I was so tired of walking on eggshells, of second-guessing every decision, of feeling like I was perpetually failing despite giving everything I had. "Rough morning?" I looked up sharply, hastily wiping at my tears. Marcus Santoro stood a few feet away, concern evident in his dark eyes. He was Dominic's business partner, though their relationship seemed more complicated than simple partnership. Where Dominic was all sharp edges and barely controlled violence, Marcus was smooth charm and calculated warmth. He was handsome in a different way, with perfectly styled black hair, a face that belonged in cologne advertisements, and suits that rivaled Dominic's in expense, but somehow looked less threatening. Where Dominic's presence made you want to either run or submit, Marcus's made you want to trust him, confide in him, lean on his obvious strength. "I'm fine," I lied, attempting a smile that probably looked as fake as it felt. "With all due respect, Diana, you look like you've been crying." He moved closer, not presumptuous enough to sit without invitation, but near enough to offer comfort. "Did something happen?" I shouldn't confide in him. Marcus was Dominic's partner, which made him either an ally or an enemy depending on which way the wind blew in their complicated dynamic. But I was so tired of carrying everything alone, of pretending I was unaffected by Dominic's constant criticism. "Just a difficult client meeting," I hedged, the lie transparent even to my own ears. Marcus's expression suggested he knew exactly who the difficult client was. "Dominic can be exacting," he said carefully, his tone diplomatic. "He demands perfection from everyone, but especially from those closest to him." "Closest to him?" I couldn't help the bitter laugh that escaped. I'm his secretary, not his confidant. You're more than that. Marcus sat beside me then, maintaining a respectful distance but near enough that I could smell his cologne, something lighter and more citrus-based than Dominic's dark, woody scent. You're the only person who's lasted more than 6 months in that position. The only one who can anticipate his needs before he voices them. The only one he trusts to handle the most sensitive aspects of his business. The words should have been comforting, but they only highlighted how little Dominic valued what I brought to the table. Trust isn't worth much when it comes with constant criticism and reminders that I'm replaceable. Something shifted in Marcus's expression, a calculation behind the sympathy. He said that to you? I nodded, fresh tears threatening. This morning, after I worked until midnight last night finishing a report he needed, after coming in at 6 a.m. to prepare for meetings, after doing everything exactly as he specified. It's never enough. I'm never enough. Marcus reached out, his hand hovering near mine but not quite touching. May I? He asked, his voice gentle. I nodded, and he took my hand in his touch warm and surprisingly comforting. You're wrong, he said firmly. You're more than enough, Diana. Dominic is a fool if he can't see that. The words cracked something open inside me, and suddenly I was crying harder. 18 months of suppressed emotions pouring out in that small park, while Marcus Santoro held my hand and offered quiet comfort. He didn't try to stop my tears or offer platitudes. He simply sat with me, his presence steady and reassuring in a way I desperately needed. When I finally regained control, embarrassment washed over me. I'm sorry, I said, pulling my hand back and wiping at my face. That was completely unprofessional. It was human. Marcus corrected gently. He pulled a handkerchief from his pocket, real cloth embroidered with his initials, and offered it to me. You're allowed to be human, Diana, even if Dominic seems to forget that. I dabbed at my eyes, ruining what little makeup I'd been wearing. I should get back. My lunch break is almost over. Have dinner with me. The invitation caught me off guard. I looked at Marcus properly for the first time, seeing the genuine concern in his dark eyes, the slight smile on his lips. I don't think that's appropriate. Why not? He stood as I did, his posture relaxed, but his attention fully focused on me. You need someone to talk to who understands the pressures of working with Dominic. I promise, completely professional. Just 2 colleagues sharing a meal. I should have said no. Should have recognized that accepting would complicate an already complex situation. But I was so tired of being alone, of having no one who understood what it was like to navigate Dominic Caruso's impossible expectations. Okay, I heard myself say. Dinner would be nice. His smile widened, transforming his face. Perfect. I'll pick you up at 7. Text me your address. He handed me his business card, then checked his watch. For now, go take a longer lunch. You've earned it. I walked back to the office feeling strangely lighter despite my earlier tears. Maybe Marcus was right. Maybe I just needed someone to talk to. Someone who understood. It was innocent. Just dinner between colleagues. The office was still quiet when I returned, most people not yet back from lunch. I settled at my desk and pulled up my email, trying to focus on work despite my earlier emotional breakdown. But my attention kept drifting to Marcus's business card, to the promise of dinner and conversation, and someone actually seeing me as more than just competent or replaceable. I didn't notice Dominic emerging from his office until he was standing directly in front of my desk. I looked up sharply, my heart jumping into my throat at his sudden proximity. Where were you? His voice was cold, controlled, but something flickered in those storm-gray eyes that I couldn't quite identify. Lunch break, I replied, keeping my tone professional despite my still raw emotions. You told me I could go. You were gone 53 minutes. Your lunch break is 45. Of course he'd been counting. I apologize. It won't happen again. His jaw tightened almost imperceptibly, his gaze traveling over my face with an intensity that made my skin prickle. Could he tell I'd been crying? Did he care? See that it doesn't. I need the quarterly reports compiled by 5. He turned to go back to his office, then paused, his back still to me. You have something on your blouse. Mascara. Then he was gone, the door closing behind him with a soft click that somehow felt more final than a slam. I looked down at my white silk blouse, and sure enough, there was a small black smudge where I must have pressed Marcus's handkerchief too close. I grabbed my emergency blazer from my bag and slipped it on, covering the evidence of my breakdown. Then I threw myself into work, determined to have those reports finished early, to prove that I was competent regardless of what Dominic Caruso thought. But as I worked, I couldn't shake the memory of those storm gray eyes traveling over my face, couldn't stop analyzing the strange note in his voice when he'd mentioned the mascara. It was probably nothing, just another criticism disguised as observation, another reminder that I wasn't measuring up to his standards. Still, something about the moment felt weighted, important in a way I couldn't quite articulate. Like I'd crossed some invisible line without realizing it, and nothing would be quite the same after today. The days following my lunch with Marcus felt like walking through a minefield blindfolded. Dominic's already impossible standards somehow reached new heights of absurdity. Every document needed 3 revisions instead of 1. Every meeting required preparation that would have challenged a team of 5. Every interaction was laced with criticism delivered in that cold, controlled voice that made me want to simultaneously scream and cry. But the worst part wasn't the criticism. It was the way he looked at me now. Those storm gray eyes tracking my every movement with an intensity that made my skin feel too tight. I'd catch him staring when he thought I wasn't paying attention. His expression unreadable, but his focus absolute. It was unnerving, suffocating, and completely at odds with his verbal dismissiveness. My dinner with Marcus had been surprisingly pleasant. We'd gone to a quiet Italian restaurant where he'd been charming and attentive, asking about my life outside work, my family, my dreams. He'd made me laugh with stories about his early days working with Dominic, back when they'd been young and hungry and building an empire from nothing. He'd been the perfect gentleman, walking me to my door and simply thanking me for a lovely evening before leaving. It should have been innocent, forgettable. But somehow, Dominic knew. You're spending time with Marcus. It wasn't a question. Dominic had called me into his office on Friday afternoon, 3 days after my dinner with his business partner. I stood before his desk, my hands clasped in front of me to hide their trembling. We had dinner, I confirmed, keeping my voice neutral. He was kind enough to invite me after a difficult day. Something dangerous flashed across Dominic's face before his expression shuttered again. Marcus is a busy man. I'm sure he has better uses for his time than entertaining my secretary. The dismissiveness in his tone sparked anger in my chest. Perhaps he simply enjoys pleasant company that doesn't constantly criticize everything he does. The words escaped before I could stop them, and I immediately regretted the breach of professionalism. Dominic's eyes narrowed, a muscle ticking in his jaw as he stood slowly from his chair. He moved around the desk with that predatory grace, stopping close enough that I had to tilt my head back to maintain eye contact. Is that what this is about, Diana? His voice was dangerously soft. You're seeking validation elsewhere because I refuse to coddle you? I'm seeking basic human decency. I shot back, my professionalism crumbling under months of accumulated resentment. Something you seem incapable of providing. Basic human decency. He laughed, the sound cold and humorless. I pay you exceptionally well, provide you with opportunities most people would kill for, and trust you with information that could destroy empires. But because I don't pat you on the head and tell you what a good girl you are after every task, I lack basic human decency? The condescension in his tone made my cheeks burn. That's not what I meant, and you know it. Then what did you mean? He leaned closer, his cologne surrounding me, making it hard to think clearly. Explain to me, Diana, what Marcus provides that's so lacking in our professional relationship. Respect, I whispered, the word barely audible but carrying the weight of 18 months of suppressed feelings. He treats me like I matter. Something shifted in Dominic's expression, a crack in his controlled facade that revealed raw emotion beneath before he shuttered it again. If you didn't matter, you'd have been gone months ago. Then why do you treat me like I'm disposable? The question hung in the air between us, weighted with meanings neither of us were ready to acknowledge. Dominic stared at me, his storm gray eyes intense enough to strip away every defense I'd carefully constructed. For a moment, I thought he might actually answer honestly, might explain the constant criticism and impossible standards. Instead, he stepped back, his professional mask sliding firmly into place. Because in this world, Diana, everyone is disposable. The moment you forget, that is the moment you become vulnerable. The words hit like a slap, confirming every fear I'd harbored about how he viewed me. I nodded once, my throat too tight for speech, and turned to leave his office. Where are you going? His voice stopped me at the door. Home. It's 6 p.m. on a Friday. Unless you need something else. I didn't turn around, couldn't bear to look at him in that moment. Nothing that can't wait until Monday. A pause. Have a good weekend, Diana. The dismissal was clear. I walked back to my desk, gathered my belongings with mechanical precision, and left without looking back at his office door. The elevator ride down felt longer than usual, each floor a reminder of how far I'd fallen from the naive woman who'd accepted this position 18 months ago, thinking she could handle whatever Dominic Caruso threw at her. My phone buzzed as I stepped out into the cold November evening. A text from Marcus. How are you holding up? Still on for dinner tomorrow? I'd forgotten I'd agreed to see him again. He'd mentioned wanting to show me his favorite restaurant, some place he swore had the best risotto in the city. I stared at the message, weighing my options. Saying yes would complicate things further with Dominic, though I couldn't understand why he cared about my personal time. Saying no would leave me alone with my thoughts and the hollow ache in my chest. Yes. Looking forward to it, I replied. His response was immediate. Perfect. I'll pick you up at 7. And Diana? Whatever Dominic said today, remember you're worth more than he'll ever admit. I didn't question how Marcus knew I'd had a difficult conversation with Dominic. The two men seemed to have an almost telepathic connection when it came to each other's business. Instead, I tucked my phone away and headed home, trying not to think about storm gray eyes and the way they'd looked at me when I'd said Marcus treated me like I mattered. Saturday arrived with gray skies that matched my mood. I spent the morning cleaning my apartment with almost manic intensity, as if scrubbing the floors and organizing my closet could somehow bring order to the chaos of my emotions. By the time Marcus arrived at 7, I'd transformed my space and myself, donning a deep burgundy dress that I'd bought months ago but never had occasion to wear. Marcus's eyes widened appreciatively when I opened the door. You look stunning, he said, offering his arm. That color suits you. The restaurant was indeed everything he'd promised. Intimate and elegant without being pretentious. We were seated at a corner table that offered both privacy and an excellent view of the other diners. Marcus ordered wine without asking, some Italian vintage that probably cost more than I made in a week, and launched into easy conversation that gradually drew me out of my shell. He asked about my life before working for Dominic, and I found myself telling him about my younger sister Emma, who was finishing her last year of college thanks to the generous salary my position provided. I told him about my parents who died in a car accident when I was 21, leaving me to raise Emma alone. I told him about the dreams I'd had of traveling, of writing, of doing something meaningful with my life beyond managing someone else's empire. You still could, Marcus said, his dark eyes earnest. Those dreams don't have to die just because you're working for Dominic. Don't they? I took a sip of wine, feeling it warm my chest. Between the hours I work and the exhaustion, I barely have energy for anything else. When's the last time I wrote something creative? Or traveled somewhere for pleasure instead of business? Or even read a book that wasn't related to corporate law or financial regulations? Then maybe it's time to consider other options. He reached across the table, his hand covering mine in a gesture that felt both comforting and slightly too intimate. You're brilliant, Diana. Any company in this city would be lucky to have you. I should have pulled my hand back, maintained professional boundaries even though this was technically a personal dinner. But his touch was warm, and his words were balm to wounds I'd been nursing for months. So I left my hand where it was and smiled, allowing myself this moment of connection. What I didn't see was the figure standing in the restaurant's entrance, storm gray eyes fixed on our table with an expression that would have sent shivers down my spine if I'd witnessed it. I didn't see the way Dominic Caruso's hands clenched into fists at his sides, or the dangerous calm that settled over his features before he turned and left without approaching. But Marcus saw. I caught the slight smirk that crossed his face as he glanced toward the entrance, the satisfied glint in his eyes before he refocused on me. At the time, I thought nothing of it, too caught up in the pleasant evening to notice the subtle manipulation at play. We finished dinner, and Marcus insisted on walking me to my door again. This time, when we arrived, he lingered slightly longer. I enjoyed tonight, he said, his voice soft. It's rare to find someone who understands the pressures of our world but hasn't been corrupted by it yet. Yet? I raised an eyebrow. Are you saying corruption is inevitable? In Dominic's orbit? Usually. Something shifted in his expression. But maybe you're different. Maybe you'll be the one who gets out before this life claims whatever goodness you still possess. Before I could respond, he leaned in and pressed a gentle kiss to my cheek, his lips lingering just a second longer than strictly platonic. Good night, Diana. Sweet dreams. I watched him walk away, my hand unconsciously touching where his lips had been, confusion and something like guilt swirling in my chest. This was innocent, I told myself. Just two colleagues who'd become friends, sharing meals and conversation. Nothing more. But the guilt persisted as I got ready for bed, and I couldn't quite shake the feeling that I'd crossed some invisible line, broken some unspoken rule. It was irrational. Dominic and I weren't together. We barely had a functional professional relationship. I owed him nothing beyond my work. Still, as I fell asleep that night, it was storm gray eyes I saw, not warm brown ones. Monday morning arrived too quickly. I walked into the office at my usual 6:30 a.m., clutching my coffee like a lifeline. The executive floor was empty, silent except for the hum of computers and distant city sounds filtering through the windows. I settled at my desk and pulled up my email, preparing for another week of impossible demands and casual cruelty. Dominic's office door was closed when I arrived, but I knew he was there. His suit jacket hung on the coat rack visible through the glass walls, and I could see papers spread across his desk. He always arrived before me, no matter how early I came. It was like he didn't sleep, didn't need rest the way normal humans did. I'd been working for 30 minutes when his office door opened. He stood in the doorway, backlit by the morning sun streaming through his windows, his expression unreadable. Diana, my office, now. I saved my work and walked in on legs that felt unsteady, though I couldn't have said why. He closed the door behind me, and suddenly the large space felt suffocating. I saw you. The words were delivered with deadly calm. Saturday night, at Marcello's with Marcus. My heart stuttered. We had dinner. As I mentioned, we've been holding hands across the table. He interrupted, his voice still controlled, but with an edge that made my pulse quicken. He kissed you when he dropped you at your apartment. Heat flooded my cheeks, anger mixing with embarrassment. "Are you having me followed?" I was at Marcello's for a business dinner. Imagine my surprise when I saw my secretary and my business partner looking rather cozy in a corner table. He moved closer, each step measured and deliberate. "So, I'll ask you plainly, Diana. What exactly is going on between you and Marcus?" "Nothing," I said firmly, lifting my chin despite the tremor in my voice. "We're friends. He's been kind to me when I needed kindness." Kindness. Dominic laughed, the sound sharp and bitter. "Is that what you call it?" "Yes. Though I don't see how my personal life is any of your concern." He stopped directly in front of me, so close I could see the flecks of silver in his gray eyes, could count the barely visible scars on his knuckles from violence I tried not to think about. "Your personal life becomes my concern when it involves my business partner, when it creates complications that could affect our operations." "How could having dinner with Marcus possibly affect your operations?" I demanded, frustration overriding my usual caution. "Unless you're suggesting there's something unprofessional about two colleagues becoming friends." "Friends." He said the word like it tasted bitter. "Is that really what you think Marcus wants? Friendship? What else would he want?" But even as I asked, I felt something shift in my understanding. The way Marcus always seemed to know when I'd had a difficult day with Dominic. The careful questions he asked about my boss. The timing of his attention, always seeming to arrive when I was most vulnerable. "You're a smart woman, Diana." Dominic's voice softened slightly, though his posture remained rigid. "Use that intelligence. Ask yourself why Marcus suddenly took an interest in you after 18 months of barely acknowledging your existence. Ask yourself why his attention coincides so perfectly with periods of tension between us." I wanted to argue, to defend Marcus's intentions. But doubt had taken root, spreading through my certainty like cracks in glass. "If you're suggesting Marcus is using me to get to you somehow, I'm not suggesting anything. I'm telling you to be careful." Something flickered across his face, almost like concern before it disappeared behind his usual mask. "Marcus Santoro is many things, but straightforward isn't one of them. Every move he makes serves a purpose." "And what about you?" I heard myself ask. "Do your moves serve purposes too? Is that why you've been even more impossible than usual lately?" His jaw tightened. "We're not discussing my behavior." "Why not? You get to question my personal life, but yours is off limits." "Yes." The single word was delivered with absolute authority. "Because I'm your employer, and you're my employee. The power dynamic makes this conversation possible. Don't forget that." The reminder of my subordinate position stung, as he'd surely intended. I straightened my spine, gathering whatever dignity I could salvage. "Is there anything else you needed, Mr. Caruso? Or can I return to work?" Something like frustration flashed across his face. "Yes, you can return to work." He moved back to his desk, effectively dismissing me. "And Diana, schedule a meeting with the Santoro Industries team for Friday. All department heads, Marcus included." I nodded and left his office, my mind reeling from the conversation. Was Marcus really manipulating me? Or was Dominic simply jealous of any attention I received from others, possessive even while refusing to treat me with basic respect? The week that followed was torture. Every interaction with Dominic felt charged with unspoken tension. Every casual conversation with Marcus felt weighted with suspicion. I found myself analyzing every word, every gesture, trying to determine who was being honest and who was playing games I didn't fully understand. Marcus continued his attentive behavior, asking about my day, bringing me coffee when I looked tired, offering encouragement when Dominic's criticism became particularly harsh. He was everything Dominic wasn't: gentle, considerate, openly appreciative of my work and my worth. But I couldn't stop thinking about what Dominic had said, about timing and purposes and manipulation disguised as kindness. I started noticing patterns I'd missed before. How Marcus always seemed to appear right after I'd had a difficult interaction with Dominic. How his questions, while seeming innocent, always circled back to my relationship with his business partner. How his attention made me feel valued, but also somehow indebted. By Friday, I felt like I was being pulled apart by opposing forces, each claiming to know what was best for me, while potentially serving their own interests. The meeting Dominic had scheduled loomed like a storm on the horizon, and I had the unsettling feeling that whatever happened in that conference room would change everything. I had no idea how right I was. The conference room was a monument to power and intimidation. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the city spread below like a game board, and the massive mahogany table could seat 20 comfortably. Today, only 8 of us occupied it, the key players in whatever chess match Dominic and Marcus were engaged in, with me apparently serving as an unwitting pawn. I sat in my usual position during these meetings, slightly behind and to Dominic's right, my tablet ready to take notes and manage the agenda. But today felt different. The air practically crackled with tension, and I noticed how carefully Marcus and Dominic watched each other across the table, their polite smiles not quite reaching their eyes. "Gentlemen, thank you for coming," Dominic began, his voice carrying that dangerous calm I'd learned to recognize as a warning sign. "I've called this meeting to discuss some concerns that have come to my attention regarding the Riverside Development Project." The Riverside Project was Marcus's baby, a massive commercial and residential complex that would transform an entire neighborhood. I'd helped prepare countless documents related to it, knew every financial projection and timeline by heart. But Dominic's tone suggested this wasn't a standard progress update. Concerns? Marcus's smile remained in place, but I saw the slight tension in his shoulders. The project is proceeding exactly on schedule, perhaps even ahead in some areas. Financially, yes. Dominic leaned back in his chair, a predator at ease before the strike. But I've received some interesting information about your construction partners, specifically their connections to certain families we've been careful to keep at arm's length. The temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees. I glanced around the table and saw the other executives shifting uncomfortably, clearly sensing the undercurrent of danger. This wasn't really about construction partners. This was personal, a power play disguised as business. "I'm not sure what you're implying," Marcus said carefully. "All our partners were vetted according to standard protocols. Standard protocols that somehow miss the fact that Romano Construction has direct ties to the Vitelli organization." Dominic's voice remained calm, but his eyes had gone hard as steel. "The same Vitellis we've been negotiating with regarding territory disputes. How unfortunate that such an oversight occurred." I stopped typing, my fingers frozen above the tablet. The Vitelli family was dangerous territory, literally. They controlled parts of the city that bordered Dominic's interests, and their relationship was delicate at best, volatile at worst. If Marcus had really formed business relationships with Vitelli-connected companies without disclosure, it was either stunningly careless or deliberately provocative. "If there's been an oversight, we can address it," Marcus said smoothly. "Replace the construction partners, eat the financial loss. It's not ideal, but it's manageable." "Is it?" Dominic leaned forward slightly. "Because from where I'm sitting, this looks less like an oversight and more like a calculated move. And I'm beginning to wonder what other calculated moves might be happening under my nose." The implication hung in the air, heavy and unmistakable. Marcus's smile finally faded, replaced by something harder. "If you have something to say, Dominic, say it plainly." "Very well." Dominic's gaze swept the room before settling back on Marcus. "For the past month, you've been spending considerable time with my executive secretary, taking her to dinners, offering her comfort and support, making her feel valued and appreciated. All very thoughtful and kind, except," he paused, "for the fact that 18 months prior, you couldn't have picked her out of a lineup if your life depended on it." My stomach dropped. Every eye in the room suddenly fixed on me, and I felt heat flood my cheeks. This was not happening. Dominic was not calling out my personal life in front of the entire executive team. "Diana is a remarkable woman," Marcus replied, his voice still controlled. "It took me 18 months to notice what you've been blind to all along, that she's intelligent, capable, and deserves far better treatment than your constant criticism. How noble of you to notice." Dominic's voice could have cut glass. "Tell me, Marcus, did your sudden interest in Diana's well-being begin before or after our disagreement about the Harborview acquisition?" I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. The Harborview acquisition had been a massive point of contention between Dominic and Marcus 2 months ago, right around the time Marcus had found me crying in the park. I'd thought the timing was coincidental, that Marcus's kindness had been genuine. Now I wasn't so sure. "The two things are completely unrelated," Marcus said, but I heard the lie in his voice. Everyone in that room heard it. "Are they?" Dominic stood slowly, his tall frame seeming to fill the entire space. "Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you identified a vulnerability and exploited it. You noticed that Diana and I have a complicated professional relationship, and you saw an opportunity. Get close to her, gain her trust, maybe learn some things about my operations in the process. And as a bonus, distract me with jealousy while you make your real moves behind my back." The word jealousy echoed in my mind, but I barely processed it. I was too busy replaying every interaction with Marcus through this new lens, seeing the manipulation where I'd seen kindness. The careful questions about Dominic's schedule, the interest in which clients I was preparing documents for, the way he gently encouraged me to share frustrations about my job. I'd been such a fool. "That's an interesting theory," Marcus said, standing as well. "Based on what? Your paranoia?" "Based on phone records showing regular contact between you and Victor Romano. Based on financial transfers that don't quite add up. Based on the fact that every time you've taken Diana to dinner, you've somehow ended up at restaurants where key Vitelli family members also happen to be dining." Dominic's voice never rose, but the threat in it was unmistakable. "You're not as subtle as you think, Marcus." I stood on shaking legs, my tablet nearly slipping from my hands. "I need to be excused." "Sit down, Diana." Dominic's command was sharp. "No." The word escaped before I could stop it, years of suppressed feelings boiling over. "I won't sit here and be discussed like I'm a chess piece in whatever game you two are playing. I'm a person, not a strategic asset to be exploited or protected according to your convenience." I turned and walked toward the door, needing to escape the suffocating room and all the eyes watching my humiliation. But Marcus's voice stopped me. "Diana, wait. Let me explain." "Explain what?" I spun around, tears threatening but fury keeping them at bay. "Explain how you used my loneliness and frustration to manipulate me? How you pretended to care when really you were just gathering information? How you made me feel valued when I was really just a means to an end?" "It wasn't like that," Marcus said. But his expression told a different story. There was guilt there, and calculation, and the cold acknowledgement of being caught. Yes, it was. The realization settled over me with crushing weight. Everything you said about me deserving better, about Dominic not appreciating my worth, it was all just strategy. You were playing on my insecurities to get to him. I looked at Dominic then, standing rigid beside his chair, his expression unreadable but his eyes burning with something that might have been vindication or anger or something else entirely. And you couldn't just tell me what you suspected. You had to let me figure it out publicly, in front of the entire executive team. Because God forbid you have an actual conversation with me like I'm a human being instead of an employee. "Diana," Dominic began, but I cut him off. "No. You don't get to explain either. Not right now." I looked between them, these two powerful men who'd been using me as a weapon against each other. "You're both manipulative and cruel in your own ways. The only difference is that Marcus pretended to be kind while doing it." I left the conference room without waiting for dismissal. walking back to my desk on legs that felt disconnected from my body. My hands shook as I grabbed my purse and coat, barely registering the concerned looks from the few staff members who'd witnessed my exit. The elevator ride down felt endless, each floor a reminder of how high I'd climbed, only to discover the view wasn't worth the cost. I'd sacrificed so much for this job, my social life, my creative pursuits, my sister's concerns about how thin and tired I'd become. And for what? To be a pawn in power? Struggles between men who saw me as nothing more than a useful tool? I walked out of the building into the cold afternoon air, not sure where I was going, but certain I couldn't stay. My phone buzzed repeatedly. Texts and calls from both Dominic and Marcus that I ignored. Let them stew in the mess they'd created. Let them figure out their power dynamics without me. I ended up at the same park where Marcus had found me crying, the bitter irony not lost on me. I sat on the same bench, staring at bare trees and gray sky, and finally allowed myself to process everything that had just happened. Marcus had used me. That hurt. But it wasn't surprising in retrospect. I'd known from the beginning that his world was one of strategy and manipulation. I'd just been foolish enough to think I was somehow exempt from it. But Dominic, that was more complicated. His revelation about Marcus's manipulation suggested he'd been watching, investigating, protecting in his own twisted way. But he'd also let me stumble into the trap, had allowed me to be humiliated rather than simply warning me privately. Or maybe he had tried to warn me, in his way. The comments about timing and Marcus's intentions. The tension whenever Marcus's name came up. The barely controlled anger when he'd seen us at dinner. I'd dismissed it all as possessiveness or paranoia, never considering that he might actually be trying to protect me. But protection shouldn't come with constant criticism. Care shouldn't manifest as cruelty. If Dominic wanted to claim he was looking out for me, he had a hell of a way of showing it. My phone buzzed again. This time I looked. A text from Dominic. We need to talk. Not here. Tonight. My apartment. Please. The please caught me off guard. In 18 months, I wasn't sure I'd ever heard Dominic Caruso say please about anything. It was always commands and expectations, never requests. I should have ignored it. Should have gone home, packed my things, and never looked back. Started fresh somewhere far from the tangled web of Dominic and Marcus and their dangerous world. But beneath the anger and hurt was something else. Curiosity, maybe. Or the need for closure. Or some twisted part of me that still craved answers from the man who'd criticized me daily, while apparently protecting me from betrayal I'd been too blind to see. I texted back, 8 p.m. This better be worth my time. His response was immediate. It will be. I promise. Another promise from Dominic Caruso. I wasn't sure I believed it, but I'd show up anyway. Because despite everything, despite the manipulation and anger and humiliation, I needed to understand, needed to know if there was any truth beneath all the lies, or if I was just as disposable as he'd always said. The afternoon stretched before me with hours to kill before the meeting. I couldn't go back to the office. Not today, maybe not ever. So I walked, letting the cold November air clear my head as I tried to decide what I would say when I faced Dominic tonight. Because one thing was certain. If I was going to walk away from this job and this man, it would be on my terms, with all my questions answered and all my grievances aired. Dominic Caruso wanted to talk? Fine. But he was going to hear some truths he'd been avoiding for 18 months. And if he didn't like what I had to say, he could add it to his long list of my inadequacies. Dominic's penthouse occupied the top 2 floors of a building I'd never been inside, despite working for him for 18 months. The address he'd texted was in the most exclusive district of the city, the kind of place where security was omnipresent but invisible, where wealth whispered instead of shouting. The doorman recognized my name when I arrived at 7:58 p.m., ushering me inside with deferent efficiency. The elevator required a key card, which he provided with instructions to return it to the front desk when I left. The ride up was smooth and silent, giving me too much time to second-guess this decision. The doors opened directly into Dominic's apartment, and I stepped into a space that was quintessentially him. All clean lines and muted colors, expensive but not ostentatious, beautiful in its precision. Floor-to-ceiling windows showcased the city lights below, and I could see a private terrace through the glass despite the November chill. "You came." Dominic's voice made me turn. He stood near the windows, silhouetted against the city lights. He'd changed from his work suit into dark jeans and a black sweater that emphasized his broad shoulders. It was jarring seeing him dressed casually, more human somehow. I said I would be here. I stayed near the elevator, maintaining distance. "You wanted to talk. So talk." He moved to a small bar area and poured 2 glasses of what looked like whiskey. He brought one to me, and I accepted it more for something to do with my hands than any desire to drink. He returned to the windows, creating space between us that felt both respectful and calculated. "I owe you an apology," he began, and the words were so unexpected I nearly dropped my glass. "For this afternoon, for exposing Marcus's manipulation publicly instead of handling it privately. You deserved better than that." I deserved better than a lot of things. I took a small sip of the whiskey, feeling it burn down my throat. "Including 18 months of being treated like I'm perpetually disappointing you despite giving you everything I have." His jaw tightened. "I never said you were disappointing." "You didn't have to say it. It was in every criticism, every revision, every reminder that I was replaceable." I set the glass down on a nearby table with more force than necessary. "Do you have any idea what it's like working for someone who makes you feel like you're constantly failing no matter how hard you try?" "Yes, actually." He turned to face me fully. "I do. My father was the same way. Nothing was ever good enough. Every achievement came with a list of ways it could have been better. He died still thinking I was inadequate. The admission caught me off guard. Dominic rarely spoke about his family, his past, anything personal. So you decided to repeat the pattern with your employees?" "I decided to demand excellence because mediocrity gets people killed in my world." His voice hardened slightly. "Every mistake you don't make, every detail you catch, every problem you solve before it becomes critical. Those things keep us all alive, Diana. The criticism wasn't about you being disappointing. It was about keeping you sharp. By making me feel worthless. By making sure you never got complacent." He moved closer, and I fought the urge to back away. "You want to know the truth? The real reason I've been so hard on you? Please enlighten me." "Because you're brilliant and capable, and every day you spend in that position is a day you're not pursuing something better, something safer. Something that doesn't put you in the crosshairs of men like Marcus who see you as a tool to be used." His storm gray eyes held mine with uncomfortable intensity. "I thought if I pushed hard enough, criticized enough, reminded you that you could be replaced, you'd eventually get fed up and leave. Find a nice normal job with a nice normal boss who'd appreciate you without putting you at risk." I stared at him, trying to process this revelation. That's the most twisted logic I've ever heard. "Welcome to my world." A bitter smile crossed his face. "Where protection looks like cruelty and caring means pushing away. Don't." I held up a hand. "Don't try to make your behavior sound noble. If you really wanted to protect me, there are about 1,000 better ways you could have done it than making me feel like I wasn't good enough." "You're right." He exhaled roughly, running a hand through his dark hair. "I handled it badly. I handle everything badly when it comes to you." "When it comes to me? What does that mean?" He was quiet for a long moment, his gaze dropping to the whiskey in his glass. When he spoke again, his voice was lower, more vulnerable than I'd ever heard it. "You really don't know, do you? How difficult it's been having you right outside my office every day. How many times I've had to remind myself that you're my employee, and crossing that line would be catastrophically inappropriate. How much restraint it's taken not to... He stopped, jaw clenching. My heart hammered against my ribs. Not to what? Not to do this. He closed the distance between us in 2 strides, his free hand coming up to cup my face with surprising gentleness. Not to tell you that you've been driving me insane since the day I interviewed you. Not to admit that every criticism was partly frustration with myself for wanting something I couldn't have. I should have stepped back, should have slapped him, should have demanded he clarify whether this was another manipulation. But I was frozen, caught in the intensity of his gaze and the warmth of his hand against my skin. You wanted to fire me so I'd leave, I whispered, the pieces finally clicking into place. But you couldn't actually do it because despite my better judgment, despite knowing I should stay the hell away from you, I need you there. His thumb traced along my cheekbone. I need to see you every day, hear your voice, watch you handle everything I throw at you with grace and competence. It's selfish and wrong, and I'm not proud of it, but there it is. The ugly truth. And Marcus? The manipulation? Dominic's expression darkened. I've suspected for weeks that he was using you to distract me while making his real moves. The Vitelli connections, the questionable partnerships, the way he always seemed to know things he shouldn't. When I saw you with him at that restaurant, looking at him like he was some kind of savior, his hand tightened fractionally on my face. I wanted to tear him apart. So you were jealous. Insanely. No hesitation. No attempt to hide it. Not because I have any claim on you, but because I saw him giving you everything I couldn't. The attention, the kindness, the validation. All the things you deserved that I was too fucking stubborn and scared to provide. I pulled back from his touch, needing space to think clearly. This doesn't make sense. You're Dominic Caruso. You could have any woman you wanted. Why fixate on your secretary who you claim to want to drive away? Because those other women want Dominic Caruso, the mob boss, the powerful man, the dangerous reputation. He set his glass down and turned to face the windows, his reflection ghostly against the city lights. You're the only person who's ever looked at me and seen past all of that, who asks if I've eaten when I'm working late, who remembers I take my coffee black with no sugar, who doesn't flinch when I lose my temper because you know the anger isn't really directed at you. How would I know that when you're constantly criticizing everything I do? Because you're smart enough to notice that my harshest criticism comes after you've done something exceptionally well. After you've proven once again that you're too good for this position and this life. He turned back to me. I lash out when you remind me that I don't deserve you anywhere near my world. The vulnerability in his confession was almost harder to process than Marcus's betrayal. This was Dominic Caruso admitting weakness, acknowledging emotions, dropping the controlled mask he wore so carefully. It felt more intimate than any physical touch could have been. So what now? I asked, exhausted suddenly. Where do we go from here? That depends entirely on you. He moved closer again, but didn't touch me this time. You could walk away right now. I'd write you a recommendation that would get you hired anywhere in the city. I'd make sure you were set up financially, that Emma's college was fully covered. You could start fresh, away from me and my world and all the complications that come with it. Or you could stay. The words were quiet, but weighted with meaning. Not as just my secretary, but as... He paused, seeming to choose his words carefully. As someone I'm trying to figure out how to be better for. Someone who makes me want to be better, even though I'm probably going to keep failing at it spectacularly. My breath caught. You're asking me to... What exactly? I'm asking you to give me a chance to prove I can be more than the cruel boss who made you cry. I'm asking for time to show you that beneath all the criticism and distance, There's a man who cares about you more than he's comfortable admitting. His hand came up again, this time just barely touching my cheek. I'm asking you not to leave, Diana. Not yet. Not before you know the whole truth about what you mean to me. I should have said no. Should have recognized that this was just another form of manipulation. Different from Marcus's, but potentially more dangerous, because I wanted so badly to believe it. But standing there in his apartment, seeing vulnerability in eyes that usually held only control, I found myself wavering. I need time, I finally said, to think about all of this, to figure out what I actually want beyond just reacting to being manipulated. Take all the time you need. He stepped back, giving me space. But Diana, whatever you decide, know that you were never replaceable, never disposable. You were always... He stopped, jaw clenching. I was always what? Everything, he said quietly. You were always everything. The confession hung between us, weighted with months of unspoken tension and complicated emotions. I grabbed my purse, needing to leave before I did something stupid, like believe him completely. I should go. He nodded, not trying to stop me. But as I reached the elevator, his voice called out one more time. Diana, thank you for coming tonight, for listening. It means more than you know. I stepped into the elevator without responding, my mind reeling from everything that had been said and implied. The ride down felt longer than the ride up, giving me too much time to process Dominic's confessions and my own confused reactions to them. The doorman called me a car, and I rode home in silence, staring out at the city lights and trying to make sense of the impossible situation I'd found myself in. Marcus had used me, that much was clear. But what Dominic was offering felt almost more complicated. A relationship built on months of miscommunication and crossed signals, where cruelty had been masquerading as protection and distance had been hiding desire. Could I trust him? Could I trust myself around him? Or was I just trading one form of manipulation for another, this time with better packaging? I didn't have answers as I finally reached my apartment and collapsed onto my couch. My phone showed missed calls from both Marcus and Dominic, messages I couldn't bring myself to read yet. Tomorrow I'd have to make decisions. Tonight, I just needed to sit with the truth that had been revealed and figure out what the hell I was going to do with it. Because one thing was certain, I couldn't go back to the way things were. Whether that meant walking away completely or figuring out what a relationship with Dominic might look like beyond boss and secretary, I needed to choose my path forward based on what I wanted, not what either of them was trying to manipulate me into wanting. The question was, what did I actually want? I called in sick Monday morning, something I'd never done in 18 months. The voice of Dominic's assistant, the one who covered when I wasn't there, sounded surprised when I explained I needed a personal day. I wondered what excuse Dominic had given for Friday's dramatic meeting conclusion. What story was circulating about the secretary who'd walked out in the middle of an executive session. I spent the day in my apartment, trying to write down everything that had happened to make sense of it. The list kept growing. Marcus's manipulation, Dominic's confession, 18 months of complicated emotions I'd been suppressing. By evening, I was no closer to clarity than I'd been the night before. My phone rang Tuesday morning. Dominic, not his assistant. I stared at his name on the screen for 3 rings before answering. Diana. Just my name, but I heard relief in his voice. Are you okay? Define okay. Fair enough. A pause. Are you coming in today? I don't know yet. I curled up on my couch, phone pressed to my ear. I don't know if I can face everything. The whispers, the judgment, Marcus. Marcus isn't in the office. I've temporarily reassigned him to oversee the Boston expansion. He'll be there for the foreseeable future. Relief and something else washed through me. You sent him away. I sent him where his attention should have been all along, instead of playing games in my territory. Dominic's voice held an edge. But Diana, I need you to know. If you decide not to come back, I'll understand. I'll help you however I can. But selfishly, I'm hoping you'll give me a chance to show you that last Friday was a beginning, not an ending. A beginning of what? Of honesty. Of treating you the way you deserve. Of figuring out if what's been building between us for 18 months is real or just workplace tension that feels like something more. My heart hammered at his directness. And if I come back, what changes? Everything and nothing. I heard him exhale. Your job remains the same. You're still my executive secretary because you're phenomenal at it. But the criticism stops. The emotional distance stops. The pretending I don't care about you beyond your professional capacity stops. That's a lot of change. It's necessary change. Diana, I won't lie to you. I'm not good at this. At being open about feelings or navigating relationships that matter. I'll probably screw up constantly, but I'm willing to try if you are. I should have said no, should have recognized that workplace relationships, especially with massive power imbalances, were disasters waiting to happen. But some traitorous part of me wanted to believe in the possibility he was offering. I need ground rules, I heard myself say. Name them. First, complete honesty. No more game playing, no more manipulation. If you have concerns about something or someone, you tell me directly instead of letting me walk into situations blind. Agreed. Second, respect. I'm not just your employee. I'm a person with thoughts and feelings and boundaries. You don't get to cross those boundaries just because you pay my salary. Agreed. Though I reserve the right to push gently at the boundaries you use to protect yourself from getting hurt, sometimes those walls need questioning. The distinction made me pause. Fair. Third, discretion. Whatever this is stays private. I won't have people thinking I slept my way into my position. Anyone who knows your work knows that's impossible. His voice warmed slightly. But yes, discretion is essential. Not just for your reputation, for your safety. The less people know about what you mean to me, the less they can use you as leverage. The reminder of his dangerous world sent a chill through me. Speaking of which, that's Rule 4. You tell me what I'm really getting into. No sanitized versions of your business. No protecting me from ugly truths. If staying in your orbit puts me at risk, I deserve to know exactly what that risk looks like. Silence stretched so long, I thought he might have hung up. Finally, that's the rule I'm most reluctant to agree to. Not because I don't want to be honest, but because once you know everything, I might run, I finished. That's my choice to make, Dominic. But I make it with full information, or not at all. Another long pause. Okay. Complete transparency about my business and its implications. But Diana, it's ugly. Uglier than you probably imagine. I can handle ugly. What I can't handle is being kept in the dark while people like Marcus manipulate me. Then we have a deal. His voice held both relief and resignation. 4 rules: complete honesty, mutual respect, discretion, and full transparency about my world. Anything else? One more thing. I want to see Marcus one more time. I need to hear his explanation, his excuse, whatever justification he's concocted. I need to look him in the eye and understand why he did what he did. I expected Dominic to object, to refuse to let me anywhere near Marcus. Instead, I'll arrange it, but not alone. I'll be there. To protect me or to intimidate him? Both. Is that a problem? I considered. No. Actually, it might help keep things civil. Then I'll set it up for this week. Diana, does this mean you're coming back? It means I'm coming back Wednesday. To talk in person, to see if this new dynamic is even possible. I took a breath. And to tell you some truths of my own that you might not like hearing. I look forward to it. Warmth filled his voice. See you Wednesday, Diana. After we hung up, I sat for a long time staring at my phone. What was I doing? Agreeing to explore something with my boss. A man whose world included violence and danger I couldn't fully comprehend yet. A man who'd admitted he was terrible at relationships and would probably hurt me without meaning to. But beneath the fear and doubt was something else. Curiosity. Hope. The tingling possibility that maybe Dominic's broken and my broken could somehow fit together in a way that made sense. Emma called that afternoon, her video chat popping up on my screen with her usual impeccable timing for sensing when I was in crisis. "You look terrible," she announced by way of greeting. "What happened? Did that horrible boss of yours finally push you too far?" I'd been vague about my work situation with Emma, not wanting to worry her. But looking at her concerned face, I found myself spilling everything. Marcus's manipulation, the confrontation, Dominic's confession. She listened in silence, her expression growing more incredulous with each revelation. "Let me get this straight," she said when I finished. "Your boss has been cruel to you for 18 months because he's attracted to you and didn't know how to handle it? And now you're considering dating him?" Not dating exactly. More like exploring the possibility that we might be compatible outside of work. "Diana." Emma's voice took on that big sister tone despite being 4 years younger. "That's what dating is. And this sounds like the messiest possible situation." "I know. But you're going to do it anyway." "I think so. Maybe. I don't know." I rubbed my face tiredly. "Is it completely insane?" "Probably." Emma's expression softened. "But you've been different these past 18 months. More driven, yes, but also more alive in a weird way. Like working for this man challenged you in ways that made you grow. If that's partly because of unresolved feelings between you, then maybe it's worth exploring. Just be careful, okay?" He sounds complicated. Complicated is putting it mildly. And make sure he treats you right. I don't care how powerful he is. If he makes you cry again, I'm coming there and keying his expensive car. I laughed despite everything. "Deal. I'll let you know if I need you to be my getaway driver." We talked for another hour, and by the time we hung up, I felt more centered. Emma was right. Dominic was complicated, and this situation was messy. But I'd been playing it safe my entire life, making the responsible choice, taking care of everyone else. Maybe it was time to do something just because I wanted to. Consequences be damned. Wednesday morning arrived too quickly. I dressed with extra care, choosing a charcoal gray dress that was professional but flattering, my armor against whatever the day might bring. The elevator ride up to the executive floor felt longer than usual, and I noticed people's eyes tracking me when I emerged. Apparently, Friday's drama had become office gossip. I ignored the stares and settled at my desk, powering up my computer with practiced efficiency. Dominic's office door was closed, but I could see him inside through the glass walls, already at work despite the early hour. He must have sensed my arrival because his head came up, his storm gray eyes finding mine through the glass. He stood and came to his door, opening it but not stepping out into the common area. "Diana, welcome back." His voice was professionally neutral, but his eyes said something different. "Could I see you in my office?" I grabbed my tablet and walked in, hyper-aware of the curious gazes following me. He closed the door behind me, and suddenly we were alone for the first time since his apartment. "How are you?" he asked, and the genuine concern in his voice made my defenses waver. Honestly, confused and anxious and questioning all my life choices. I met his gaze directly. "But here is enough for now." He gestured to the sitting area near his windows, rather than the formal chairs in front of his desk. A small gesture, but one that spoke of trying to establish a new dynamic. "Coffee?" Please. He poured 2 cups from the machine in the corner, remembering without asking that I took mine with cream and 1 sugar. The attention to details I'd never realized he noticed made my chest tight. I've arranged for you to meet with Marcus tomorrow, he said, handing me my cup. My attorney's office, neutral territory. I'll be there, but in the waiting room unless you need me. Thank you. Diana, before we discuss work. He sat across from me, his posture less formal than I'd ever seen in this office. I need you to know something. Whatever happens between us personally, your position here is secure. If you decide you don't want to explore anything beyond professional relationship, that's completely acceptable. I won't retaliate or make your life difficult. You have my word. And if I decide I do want to explore it? Something heated flickered in his eyes. Then we figure it out together, slowly, making mistakes and learning as we go. You said you'd be transparent about your business. I'm holding you to that. His expression grew serious. Tonight, come to my apartment after work, and I'll tell you everything. The full scope of what I'm involved in, what risks exist, what being associated with me really means. Then you can make an informed decision about whether you still want any part of this. The gravity in his tone sent apprehension through me. That bad? Worse than you probably imagine. He held my gaze steadily. But you deserve the truth. All of it. Tonight. We spent the rest of the day working with something approximating normally, though I felt the weight of upcoming revelations pressing on me constantly. True to his word, Dominic's behavior had shifted. He still demanded excellence, but his criticism was constructive rather than cutting. He asked for my input on decisions, rather than just issuing orders. And several times throughout the day, I caught him watching me with an expression that was equal parts concern and hope. By evening, my stomach was in knots as I took the elevator up to his penthouse. He'd ordered dinner from an Italian restaurant, and the food was laid out on his dining table when I arrived. But I could barely eat, too anxious about what he was going to tell me. Finally, he pushed his own barely touched plate aside. You want the polished version or the unvarnished truth? The truth. Always the truth. He nodded, his expression grave. My grandfather started this empire by providing protection to Italian immigrants who were being exploited. Over time, that protection racket expanded into other areas: loan sharking, gambling, smuggling. By the time my father took over, the Caruso family controlled significant illegal operations alongside growing legitimate businesses. And you? I already knew the answer, but I needed to hear him say it. I'm trying to transition everything into legitimate enterprises, but it's slow, and there are people, families, who don't want that change. They see legitimacy as weakness. The Vitellis, for instance. They want to expand into territory I control, and my refusal to let them has created tension. Dangerous tension? Potentially deadly tension. His jaw clenched. Diana, people in my world don't retire or resign. They die or they get pushed out violently. Anyone associated with me, family, partners, people I care about, they become targets. That's why I've tried to keep you at arm's length. Why I was so harsh. If word got out that you mattered to me, I'd become leverage, I finished, the full picture crystallizing. Marcus figured that out. That's why he approached me. Partly. He also wanted information, wanted to distract me while he made questionable alliances. But yes, he understood that getting close to you gave him influence over me. I stood, needing to move. So what you're offering, exploring something personal, you're basically painting a target on my back. Yes. No hesitation, no sugarcoating. If we do this, if we acknowledge what's between us, you become the most valuable piece on the board. Everyone will know that hurting you is the fastest way to hurt me. Then why offer it at all? Why not keep pushing me away if it's safer? He stood too, moving to the windows overlooking the city. Because I'm selfish. Because I'm tired of pretending I don't care. Because the thought of you leaving, of never knowing what we could be, that's worse than the fear of something happening to you. That's insane. Welcome to my world. He turned to face me. But Diana, I need you to understand. If you choose this, I will protect you with everything I have. Security, resources, the full weight of my organization. You won't be undefended. Like a prisoner with very expensive guards. Like a queen with an army. His eyes held mine intensely. There's a difference. I moved to stand beside him at the windows, looking out at the city spread below. Somewhere in those lights were the Vitellis and other families, people who saw me as nothing more than a tool to be used or a threat to be eliminated. Could I really step into that world willingly? The meeting with Marcus tomorrow, I said finally. What if he reveals something that changes my perspective? Then we deal with it together. Dominic's hand found mine, his fingers intertwining. But Diana, Marcus is a lot of things, but stupid isn't one of them. Whatever he says will be calculated to serve his purposes. Don't let him manipulate you again. I won't. I squeezed his hand. But I need to understand why. Why he did it. What he hoped to gain. I need that closure. Then you'll have it. He turned to face me fully, his free hand coming up to cup my cheek. Whatever you need, whatever makes you feel safe making a decision, you'll have it. I promise. The sincerity in his voice undid me. I leaned into his touch, letting myself feel the warmth of his palm against my skin, the solid presence of him beside me. This was insane, dangerous, probably the worst decision I'd ever made. But it also felt right, in a way nothing else had in years. I'm terrified, I admitted quietly. So am I. His thumb stroked along my cheekbone. But Diana, I think you might be worth being terrified for. He kissed me then, gentle and questioning, giving me every opportunity to pull away. I didn't. Instead, I melted into him, into the kiss, into the possibility of something that was probably going to burn us both, but felt too necessary to resist. When we finally broke apart, we were both breathing hard. We're really doing this? I asked. If you want to, after you talk to Marcus tomorrow, after you've had time to process everything I've told you. If you still want this, want me, then yes, we're really doing this. I nodded, my heart racing with fear and anticipation in equal measure. I was stepping into dangerous territory, choosing complications over safety, risking everything for a man who'd admitted he'd probably hurt me without meaning to. But looking into Dominic's storm-gray eyes, seeing the vulnerability he was offering me, I couldn't bring myself to walk away. Not yet. Maybe not ever. Then let's do it, I whispered. Let's figure out what we could be together. His smile was devastating, transforming his face from hard and controlled to almost boyish. Come here, he murmured, pulling me close. And for the rest of the night, we stayed like that, wrapped in each other, talking about everything and nothing, building something fragile and precious in the shadow of danger. Tomorrow I'd face Marcus. Tomorrow I'd get my answers and closure. But tonight, I let myself believe in possibilities, in the chance that two broken people might somehow fit together in a way that made them both stronger, even if the world was determined to tear us apart. Marcus looked different than I remembered. Less polished, more defensive. He sat across from me in the neutral conference room of Dominic's attorney's office, his expression carefully controlled, but his eyes betraying anxiety. Dominic was true to his word, staying in the waiting room unless I needed him. Diana. Marcus's voice was conciliatory. Thank you for agreeing to meet with me. I'm not here for reconciliation. I kept my tone cool, professional. I'm here for answers. Why did you do it? He had the grace to look uncomfortable, It's complicated. Then uncomplicate it. You used me, manipulated my loneliness and frustration to get to Dominic. I want to know why." He sighed, running a hand through his dark hair. "Because I thought—" He stopped, started again. "Dominic and I started this business together, equal partners building something from nothing. But over the years, he's gradually pushed me into a lesser role. More advisory, less decision-making. The Riverside project was supposed to be my chance to prove I could handle major developments independently. And the Vitelli connections? Were strategic alliances Dominic should have approved but wouldn't have. He's too cautious, too worried about maintaining his precious moral high ground while transitioning to legitimacy." Bitterness crept into Marcus's voice. "I was making the deals that needed to be made to move forward. By partnering with people Dominic was actively trying to avoid entangling with. By being practical." Marcus leaned forward. "Diana, you have to understand. In our world, you either grow or you die. Dominic's attempt to go legitimate is admirable but slow. Too slow. We were losing ground to more aggressive families. So you decided to force his hand by creating situations he'd have to respond to." Understanding dawned. The Vitelli connections weren't just about the Riverside project. You were trying to create conflict that would push Dominic into retaliation, back into the violent responses he's trying to move away from. Marcus's silence confirmed it. "And I was what? Collateral damage? A convenient tool to distract him while you made your real moves?" "At first, yes." He met my eyes. "But Diana, it wasn't all manipulation. You are remarkable, intelligent, capable, deserving of better than Dominic's emotional constipation. Some of what I said to you was genuine." "Which parts? The parts where you made me feel valued? Or the parts where you were pumping me for information about Dominic's schedule and activities?" "Both can be true." He spread his hands. "I'm not going to insult you by pretending I'm a victim here. I used you. I recognized your vulnerability and exploited it, but I also genuinely enjoyed your company and respected your capabilities." How magnanimous. I stood, done with this conversation. "Here's what I learned from you, Marcus. I learned that kindness can be a weapon, that attention and validation can be manipulated to serve someone else's agenda, that I was naive to trust someone just because they treated me better than my boss. And Dominic," Marcus stood too. "Has he told you the full truth about what he is? About the things he's done? Or is he just offering you a different kind of manipulation, one packaged as protection and care?" "The difference is, Dominic admits he's broken and dangerous. He's not pretending to be my savior. He's asking if I want to navigate his mess with him despite all its ugliness. You pretended to care while using me. And you think that's better?" Marcus's voice rose slightly. "Diana, he's going to hurt you. Maybe not intentionally, but it's inevitable. Men like Dominic, we don't know how to love without destroying." "Maybe?" I grabbed my purse. "But at least I'll know exactly what I'm walking into. At least I'll make that choice with full awareness, not because someone manipulated me into it." I turned toward the door, but Marcus's voice stopped me. "The Vitellis are planning something. A move against Dominic within the next month. They think his attention is divided now. Between transitioning the business and whatever's developing with you. They see vulnerability." I turned back slowly. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because despite everything, I don't want to see him hurt. And because you're going to be caught in the crossfire whether you choose to be with him or not. You've been seen with both of us. The Vitellis know who you are now." Ice spread through my veins, so my choices are: accept Dominic's protection, or become a target anyway. Welcome to our world, Diana. Sometimes there are no good options, only survival. I left without responding, walking into the waiting room where Dominic stood by the window, his broad shoulders tense, He turned when he heard the door, his storm gray eyes searching my face. "Did you get what you needed?" "Yes, but Marcus said something about the Vitellis planning a move. He implied I'm already a target regardless of what I choose." Dominic's expression darkened. "He's not wrong, which is why I've already increased security around you. You haven't noticed, but there have been 2 of my men watching your apartment building since Friday, making sure no one approaches you. You're already protecting me." The realization shouldn't have surprised me. Without asking, without waiting for my decision. Would you have preferred I left you vulnerable while you made up your mind? He moved closer. "Diana, the moment Marcus approached you, you became connected to my world whether we acknowledged it or not. I was always going to make sure you were safe." I should have been angry at the presumption, the lack of choice. Instead, I felt something else, a grudging acceptance of the reality Marcus had laid out. There were no good options, only survival. And between Marcus's calculated manipulation and Dominic's overbearing protection, at least with Dominic, I knew where I stood. "I've made my decision," I said quietly. His entire body tensed. "And I'm in. Whatever this is, whatever we're building, I want to try. But Dominic..." I moved closer, placing my hand over his heart. "I need you to promise me something. If this becomes too much, if I can't handle your world, you let me go. You don't trap me with protection or obligation or guilt. You let me walk away." His hand covered mine, pressing it more firmly against his chest. I could feel his heartbeat, strong and steady. "I promise. But Diana, you're stronger than you think. You've been handling my world for 18 months already. You just didn't realize it. That was different. That was professional." "Was it?" His free hand cupped my face. "You've seen me at my worst. You've managed crises that would break most people. You've navigated the politics of my organization with grace and intelligence. The only thing that's changing is acknowledging what we mean to each other." He kissed me then, and it felt different from the kiss in his apartment. Less tentative, more certain. A claiming and a promise wrapped into one. When we broke apart, we were both breathing hard. "So what now?" I asked. "Now we figure it out together. We deal with the Vitellis. We navigate office politics. We try to build something real despite all the complications." He rested his forehead against mine. "And we do it without the lies and manipulation. Complete honesty, remember? Complete honesty." I took a breath. "Then honestly, I'm terrified. Of your world, of what people will say, of the danger. But I'm more terrified of walking away and spending the rest of my life wondering what we could have been." "That's enough." His arms came around me, solid and secure. "That's more than enough." We stood like that for several minutes, wrapped in each other in the attorney's conference room, building our foundation on truth and fear and stubborn determination. It wasn't perfect. It probably wasn't even smart, but it was ours. The next weeks unfolded in ways both expected and surprising. At work, Dominic and I maintained professional boundaries with an underlying current of intimacy that everyone noticed, but no one openly acknowledged. I caught the speculative looks, heard the whispered conversations that stopped when I entered rooms. Let them talk. Their opinions couldn't touch what we were building. The security Dominic had mentioned became omnipresent, but unobtrusive. I learned to recognize the men who watched from strategic positions, learned their schedules and faces. It should have felt suffocating. Instead, it felt like breathing after holding my breath for months. Dominic kept his promise about honesty. He told me everything. About his father's violent legacy, about the deals he was trying to unravel, about the families who saw his move toward legitimacy as betrayal. He introduced me to key people in his organization, not as his secretary, but as his partner, making clear that I was under his protection in every way that mattered. Emma visited 2 weeks after my meeting with Marcus, her eyes wide as she took in Dominic's building security and the men who'd accompanied me to pick her up. "This is insane," she whispered as we rode the elevator to my apartment. "Like movie-level insane." "I know. But you're happy." She studied my face carefully. "Genuinely?" I considered the question. Was I happy? My life had become infinitely more complicated. I couldn't go anywhere without security. I had to be careful about what I said and who I talked to. Simple things like grocery shopping or meeting friends required planning and coordination. But I was also more myself than I'd been in years. Dominic didn't just accept my sharp edges. He appreciated them. He asked for my opinion on business decisions, valued my insights, treated me like an equal partner despite the difference in our positions. And the way he looked at me, like I was precious and powerful simultaneously, made me feel seen in ways I'd never experienced. "Yes," I finally answered. "It's complicated and scary and probably unsustainable long term. But right now, in this moment, I'm happy." Emma hugged me tightly. "Then I'm happy for you. Just promise me you'll be careful, and that if it stops being worth it, you'll get out." "I promise." The threat Marcus had warned about materialized 3 weeks later. An attempted break-in at my apartment building, stopped by Dominic's security before the intruders made it past the lobby. 2 men with Vitelli connections, clearly intending to grab me as leverage against Dominic. I found out about it after the fact, when Dominic showed up at my door at 2 a.m. with murder in his eyes and apologies on his lips. "I'm moving you," he said without preamble. "This building isn't secure enough. I have a property, a penthouse in a building with better security. You'll have your own space, your own life, but you'll be safe." I should have objected to him making decisions without consulting me. But looking at the fear barely masked by anger in his expression, I understood. This wasn't about control. This was about a man terrified of losing something precious. "Okay," I said simply, "but I'm keeping my apartment as a backup, in case I need space or we have a fight or I just need time alone. Non-negotiable." "Done." He pulled me into his arms, holding me with a desperation that spoke of how close the call had been. "Diana, if something had happened to you..." "It didn't. Your people stopped it. Your protection worked. This time. But the Vitellis won't stop. They'll keep probing, keep looking for vulnerabilities, and you..." His arms tightened. "You're my biggest vulnerability. They know it. Marcus made damn sure of it." I pulled back enough to look at his face. "Then we deal with them. Together. Whatever that means." "It means war, essentially. Open conflict between families that could get very bloody very quickly. Or," his jaw clenched, "or I give them what they want. Territory concessions, business partnerships, transitioning back into the violent responses I've been trying to move away from." "No." I gripped his face between my hands. "You don't sacrifice what you're building, the legitimate empire, the cleaner future, just to keep me safe. We find another way." "Diana, I mean it. Dominic, I didn't sign up to be the reason you backslide into the life you're trying to leave. We figure this out together, but we figure it out without compromising your goals." Something shifted in his expression. Awe mixed with love, mixed with fear. "How are you real?" he whispered. "How do you exist in my world? The same way you exist in mine. Imperfectly, messily, but determinedly." He kissed me then, pouring everything he couldn't say into the touch. When we broke apart, his eyes had cleared, determination replacing fear. "Okay, we do this together. But Diana, that means you follow my security protocols. No arguing, no pushing back. Your safety isn't negotiable." "Agreed." As long as you remember I'm your partner, not your prisoner. I get a say in decisions that affect my life. Always. He pressed his forehead to mine. You always get a say. That's the difference between me and Marcus. I want you strong and empowered, even when it scares me. He wanted you dependent and grateful. I know. That's why I'm here with you instead of running as far from both of you as possible. We spent the rest of the night making plans. For the move, for increased security, for dealing with the Vitellis. By dawn, I was exhausted, but oddly energized. This was my life now. Navigating danger and politics alongside a man who was trying to be better, while acknowledging he'd probably fail spectacularly sometimes. It wasn't the life I'd imagined when I'd accepted the position as his secretary 18 months ago. It was infinitely more complicated, more dangerous, more consuming. But looking at Dominic as morning light filtered through my apartment windows, seeing the vulnerability he only showed me, I couldn't regret the path that had led us here. I love you, I said suddenly, the words surprising us both. I don't know when it happened exactly. Maybe it's been building for months. Maybe it was instant, and I was just too stubborn to admit it. But I love you, Dominic. Your broken edges and impossible standards, and the way you're trying so hard to be better while terrified you'll fail. His eyes went wide, storm gray softening to something almost silver. Diana, you don't have to say it back. I know this is all moving fast and you're probably not ready, and I love you too. He cupped my face with both hands. Completely, irrevocably, terrifyingly. You're the best thing that's ever happened to me, and the biggest complication, and I can't imagine my life without you in it anymore. The confession undid me. I kissed him, trying to pour 18 months of complicated emotions into the touch. He responded in kind, lifting me easily and carrying me toward my bedroom. We should sleep, I murmured against his lips, even as my fingers found the buttons of his shirt. It's almost dawn. Sleep is overrated. His mouth found the sensitive spot below my ear. I'd rather spend the time showing you exactly what you mean to me. I couldn't argue with that logic. Later, wrapped in tangled sheets with sunlight streaming through the windows, I felt something settle in my chest. Peace, maybe, or acceptance, or simply the understanding that this was right. Messy and complicated and potentially dangerous, but right. What are you thinking? Dominic's voice was rough with exhaustion. That I've made either the best or worst decision of my life. Which do you think it is? I turned to face him, tracing the scar along his ribs that I'd finally asked about. Knife fight when he was 23, defending territory his father had claimed. A reminder of the violence that was part of his history, even as he tried to build a different future. I think it's both, I said honestly. The best decision because you make me feel seen and valued and challenged in ways no one else ever has. The worst, because your world is dangerous and unpredictable, and I can't fully protect myself no matter how careful I am. But you're staying anyway. I'm staying anyway. I kissed the scar gently. Because the alternative, walking away and spending the rest of my life wondering what we could have built, that's worse than any danger your world holds. His arms tightened around me. I won't let anything happen to you. Whatever it takes, whatever I have to do, you'll be safe. I know. But Dominic, you have to let me share some of the risk. I'm not a delicate flower to be protected in a glass case. I'm your partner. That means facing the danger together. I'm not sure I can do that. Watch you walk into situations where you could get hurt. Then we'll work on it. Together. Like we're working on everything else. He was quiet for a long moment. You're infuriatingly reasonable sometimes. Someone has to be. You're dramatic enough for both of us. He laughed, the sound rumbling through his chest under my ear. Fair point. We dozed eventually, wrapped in each other as the city woke up around us. And when we finally rose to face the day, to deal with the Vitellis and office politics and all the complications of our impossible situation, I felt ready. Not because I wasn't afraid, but because I was facing it with someone who saw me as an equal partner, despite all the reasons we shouldn't work. The road ahead would be difficult. There would be missteps and arguments and moments where the danger felt overwhelming. But looking at Dominic as he dressed, stealing glances at me like he couldn't quite believe I was real, I knew we'd figure it out. One messy, complicated, beautiful step at a time. Because some things were worth fighting for, even when the odds seemed impossible. And what we were building together, honest, intense, slightly insane, that was worth every risk, every complication, every moment of fear. I'd run from one dangerous situation and straight into another. But this time, I was choosing it with eyes wide open, and a partner who'd walk through fire to keep me safe. And somehow that made all the difference.